Okay, the title of my paper is A City of Death, the Shelleys and Mont Blanc. Mont Blanc is a key focal point of Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley's jointly authored history of a 6 weeks tour, which of course includes Percy's Mont Blanc. It is also an important feature of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and The Last Man. In each of these texts, Mont Blanc is not just a mountain, it is a space of confrontation. It is an otherworldly liminal place where feelings of hope inspired by the sort of physical splendour compete with thoughts about the nature of death born from the mountain's destructive and sinister qualities. In these writings there is an interface between Mont Blanc as a site of mountain glory, that monarch of mountains in the very centre of Europe, and an older tradition that Mont Blanc's earlier name, Le Mont Maudit, or Cursed Mountain, neatly displays. Hence in Mont Blanc, Percy can present the mountain as still, snowy and serene, yet also a city of death, or harbouring an apocalyptic force that recalls the deluge and prompts him to consider the limits of the dead and living world. Mary Shelley likewise engages with this dissonance and uses it as a dramatic device in both Frankenstein and The Last Man. In both of these texts, Mont Blanc is momentarily presented as a symbol of hope and optimism, only for this to prove illusory and the mountain ultimately to function as a space where death and desolation are confronted. So originally I envisaged this paper as one that would engage with the Diodati circle's fascination, sort of psychological fascination with death during the summer of 1816. Of course, you've got the ghost story writing competition, which is a real kind of marker of that. But yeah, I have since narrowed this to consider the ways in which Percy and Mary's travel to Mont Blanc and the influence of hired guides in particular might have conditioned the tendency in their writings to associate Mont Blanc with the nature of death. So, referring to her visit with Percy and Claire to the Mer de Glace, Mary exclaims, "We set out at 9 for Montanvert with beaucoup de monde go also." This oddly phrased sentence gives a rare glimpse into the popularity of the exercise they were undertaking. Critics have rarely viewed Percy, Mary and Claire as holidaymakers on their excursion to Mont Blanc, although that is undoubtedly what they were. There is nothing unusual in the manner of their trip, and certainly nothing in its nature that exceeded the expectations of their social class. This is shown clearly in their chosen accommodation, the hiring of guides, the selection of sites visited, the mode of transportation opted for, and the purchasing of tourist trinkets in the form of mountain stones and crystals at hotels and inns along the way. Percy acknowledges the proliferation of mountain tourism in the region, but it is doubtful whether he would have considered himself as one among many. He compares a cabinet of curiosities at Sevaux to those of popular domestic sublime sites such as Keswick and Bedgelert. In his 21st of July entry in Mary's journal that opens the account of their visit to Chamonix, Percy compares Clusis to Matlock, which is a sort of domestic sublime site. What Percy reveals here is not a deep knowledge of sublime mountain sites, but rather a general knowledge of mountain locations popular with tourists. Mary and Percy's discourses with guides develop their understanding of Mont Blanc and the surrounding region. In her journal, Mary relates how she talked with the guide Cree about the manner of living in the country, and gives detailed insight into the economic lives and hardship of ordinary Savoyards living in the Chamonix Valley. And what I'm sort of suggesting here is that we should see Mary and Percy as tourists' right to be influenced by these guides. It's an influence that is generally underestimated. Yet a key part of that influence was in the framing of Mont Blanc as a place where supernatural forces were rumoured and death was always imminent. Guides were often written out of 18th century Mont Blanc travelogues, or at the very least marginalised. Yet a climate in which guides related tales of death or Mont Blanc's supernatural qualities is nonetheless still discernible, and can be found in the travelogues of Boré, John Moore and William Cox, among others. And probably a good example of this is a kind of source text for Mont Blanc, the first written account of a trip to the Mer de Glace made by William Wyndham in 1741. In his account of 1744, which so much of the literature about Mont Blanc sort of comes from it, even Mary Shelley and Percy Bysshe Shelley steal from it, but probably unbeknowingly, because it's kind of, you know, just been passed down through various literatures. Even he sort of relates how the guides tell these stories of how witches frequented the upper glaciers, you know, and Wyndham's like, he's dismissive of these tales. It's a very rational, you know, mid-18th century being. I'm not having that. And he's kind of, but yet there's still a sense in his writing that he's disappointed not to find them, you know. You know, I was thinking about this, and I think that it may explain, you know, I think if you think about Byron and Shelley, they of course sort of embrace the figure of the Alpine witch. For example, she finds her way into Manfred in the form of a character, the Witch of the Alps, and into Mont Blanc with the line, "In still cave the witch of poesy." Mary likewise invokes the mysterious dark forces of the upper glaciers. Let's consider Victor Frankenstein upon the Murdoch Glass. There, icy and glittering peaks shone in the sunlight over the clouds. My heart, which was before sorrowful, now swelled with something like joy. I exclaimed, "Wandering spirits, if indeed ye wander, and do not rest in your narrow beds, allow me this faint happiness, or take me as your companion away from the joys of life." As I said this, I suddenly beheld the figure of a man at some distance advancing towards me with superhuman speed. The appearance of the creature is uncanny. It is almost as if his appearance is the work of the wandering spirit. So while 18th century travelogue writers for the most part gave short shrift to local tales of dragons, spirits and witches frequenting the upper glaciers, the imminence of death on the mountain remained a fascination. This is particularly clear in their descriptions of destructive avalanches levelling villages, chamois hunters who found their demise in the depths of crevasses, only for their frozen forms to re-emerge years later. Or any other number of sort of mountain dangers. However, these rational and sober writers did not visit Mont Blanc fresh from writing ghost stories at Villa Diodati. They were not visionary writers ready to embrace the mysteries of the mountain, whether geological or superstitious, and face them and fashion them into confrontations with the nature of death. For Mary Shelley, the imminence of death from the mountain's natural dangers could be fused with the supernatural being of the creature, who has the qualities of an avalanche in his very nature. As we describe here, this is the creature speaking. I, like the archfiend, bore hell within me, and finding myself unsympathized with, wished to tear up trees and spread havoc and destruction around me, and then have sat down and enjoyed the ruin. Likewise, when he is shunned by the Delacies, the creature hears a fierce wind arise that becomes parallel to his emotions. The blast tore along like a mighty avalanche, and produced a kind of insanity in my spirits that burst all bounds of reason and reflection. By placing the creature at home upon the upper reaches of Mont Blanc, a space that Mary suggests was a sort of habitation of another race of beings, Mary's also embracing the mountain's folklore and using it to shape the narrative of death with which we associate the creature. Significantly, Percy and Mary's excursion to Mont Blanc exposed them to the dangers of the mountain in a physical sense. Indeed, they witnessed an avalanche on their approach to Chamonix. And there's a kind of an interesting contradiction in how they present this. And there is a sense that it was dangerous. And it was once just a view of it, and once that, if we'd been further along the road, maybe it would cause them some harm. But guides were crucial in exposing Percy and Mary to such dangers, but also in keeping them safe. The guides functioned then as they function now. Consider the view provided by the Pont Pellissier on the approach to Chamonix. This view is crucial in the formation of Percy's Mont Blanc. It is more than likely that the guides, familiar with the approach and wanting to lead Percy, Mary and Claire to the best sites and vantage points would have pre-selected the bridge as a place to stop. What is unusual is not perhaps that the party were guided to such sites so much as, in contrast to many other accounts, Percy and Mary offer us glimpses of how they were conducted by their guides. The result of this is that much of what we read about Mont Blanc in Mary and Percy's writings is a reiteration of information garnered from guides. For example, when Victor Frankenstein, during his unguided ascent to Monteverse, provides detailed information about the dangers of avalanche and rockfall risk, what he is reiterating is actually it's Mary just channeling information she's received from a guide. The influence is felt elsewhere. So on a visit to the source of the Environs, Mary describes, "We came to the source, which lies like a stage surrounded on three sides by mountains and glaciers. An immense glacier was on our left, which continually rolled stones to its foot. It is very dangerous to go directly under this. Our guide told us the story of two Hollanders who went without any guide into a cavern of the glacier and fired a pistol there, which drew down a large piece on them." The extent to which the stories of guides can be wholly trusted is debatable. After all, it was in the interest of guides to promote the idea that that unguided parties, such as the two Hollanders, were subject to greater risks. Thereby, the value in having hired a guide would be more keenly felt. The theatrical appearance of the source of the Environs, with its stage, clearly struck Mary as distinctive, and this story of death attracted her attention. She would use it as the basis for the burial of the last plague victim in The Last Man, as Lionel Verney narrates. "Near the sources of the Environs, we performed the rites for only accepted, the last of the species. Adrian and I carried the body to this desolate spot and placed it in those caves of ice beneath the glacier, which writhe and split with the slightest sound and bring destruction on those within the clefts. So, with hushed steps and in silence, we placed the dead on a bier of ice, and then, departing, stood on a rocky platform beside the river springs." Verney continues, explaining how, as a result of striking the air with our persons, vast blocks of ice covered the human image we had deposited within. A human image seems an odd phrase, following on from body. It is difficult to know what Mary is attempting to bury here in the icy sarcophagus of Mont Blanc. Her pain, her memories. Certainly The Last Man functions as a cathartic working out of much of her personal loss. But what is clear is that the stories of local guides and the sites to which they led Mary and Percy had a powerful and lasting impression that encouraged them to associate Mont Blanc with the nature of death. So, 2 or 3 months before Lord Byron visited Mont Blanc, he looked out from Lake Geneva at the mountain and its surrounding Savoyard Alps and saw, as he describes them in Childe Harold Canto 3, palaces of nature. A distant view of the mountain from the open space offered by the lake seems to promote the glory of Mont Blanc, not just for Byron, but for Mary and Percy Shelley, too, who both use Byron's famous phrase in their writings. On his arrival in Chamonix, Percy wrote to Byron, "I wish the wonder and graces of these palaces of nature would induce you to visit them whilst we, who so much value your society, remain near them." Yet by the end of the following day, after having visited the source of the Environs and the Glacier des Boissons, Percy's attitude to Mont Blanc has changed taken on a more sinister direction. And his letter to Thomas Love Peacock relates to kind of these palaces of nature have become palaces of death. Which I just think is a kind of interesting transition with what you were saying this morning, Graham. And so something, in my view, has happened here as they've moved into the closeness of Mont Blanc. Anyway, in the letter, Shelley shows a fascination with the destructive spirit Araman and considers the destructive nature of Mont Blanc and its advancing glaciers to threaten humanity. And what's changed is that he's now seen the mountain close at hand, and he can kind of maybe reflect upon the avalanches witnessed on the way into Chamonix. Yet he's also heard these disturbing tales of death from his guides. Percy's transition from seeing Mont Blanc as majestic and distant to seeing it as a place of death and animated destruction creates a dissonance that helps explain the nature behind some of the shifts in Mont Blanc. In the poem, the still, snowy and serene image that shone distantly from Pompolysia is transformed. It becomes the glaciers creep like snakes that watch their prey from far fountains, slow rolling on. There many a precipice, frost and sun in scorn of mortal power, have piled dome, pyramid and pinnacle, a city of death, distinct with many a tower and wall impregnable of beaming ice. The city of death, characterised by its dome, pyramid and pinnacle, uses the motif of classical architecture that is also found in the counter-classical Mont Blanc poems of the 1780s and 1790s. Yet while these poems deliberately applied neoclassical imagery in a manner that adapted picturesque modes of perception to emphasise the superiority of the mountain's natural beauty and sublimity, here it is used as part of a greater treatise on ruin and human catastrophe. As striking and apocalyptic an image of the city of death is, however, Shelley struggles to find the language to animate the longer time threat of glaciers that he believes advance at a rate of 300 feet a year, a fact he has incidentally taken on the hearsay of locals in preference to the less sensational theories of Horace Benedictus de Saussure, the preeminent glaciologist of the day. He's got this kind of, the glaciers, the advanced retreat, and it's quite measured. That's not sensational enough for Shelley, really. In the Scrope Davis version of Mont Blanc, Shelley inserts a city's phantom as a passing thought that once more speaks to the supernatural qualities of the mountain. In the 6 weeks tour version of Mont Blanc, by means of an internal correction, his human mind flits onwards and renders and receives fast influencings, and we are presented with a revision of the city of death and the threat of the ice. Yet not a city, but a flood of ruin is there that from the boundaries of the sky rolls its perpetual stream. Vast pines are strewing its destined path, or in mangled soil, branchless and shattered stand. The rocks drawn down from yon remotest waste have overthrown the limits of the dead and living world, never to be reclaimed. As is characteristic of ideas in Mont Blanc, Shelley has interrupted his train of thought. The glaciers of Snake's image is coupled with the prey that they watch. However, it is not until the beaming ice of the deadly glaciers has taken on the less static form of a flood of ruin that from the boundaries of the sky rolls its perpetual stream that we can discover what the prey of the deadly glaciers is. We find the dwelling place of insects, beasts and birds becomes its spoil, but this merely lies in the way, for humanity is the ultimate prey of the ice-come flood. So much of life and joy is lost. The race of man flies far in dread. His work and dwelling vanish like smoke before the tempest stream, and their place is not known. There is something magical in this destructive puff of smoke vanishing act. It works in conjunction with the many supernatural elements permeating the poem. Yet there is also engagement with poetic traditions of presenting Mont Blanc, if how Mont Blanc was presented. So Shelley's response to Coleridge's hymn before sunrise in the Vale of Chamonix is well known, but we can also see the flood of ruin as recalling Thomas Wally's Mont Blanc of 1788 and Wordsworth's deluged train of Mont Blanc in descriptive sketches. And undoubtedly Shelley is engaging here with Neptunist geological theories and Buffon's earth cooling theory. Yet the greater question is, why has Mont Blanc as a space of death and supernatural forces proved so attractive, not just to Percy but to Mary also? And this, of course, is a bigger and more problematic question, and I doubt we'll get lost in the sort of psychological problems. But what I am more certain of is that the influence of guides, locals and mountains, and the mountain's sort of innate natural dangers are things that we should consider crucial in the shaping of Mont Blanc as a paradoxically human, yet non-human physical and psychological space, a city of death. Okay, thank you.